Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor, joined by the Big O, Jerry Ostroski, and Owen, about to dive in to what is probably going to be the best offensive line show we've done so far. Owen, what was your overall summary of this group of 8 players?
I think we got a good mix of athletic freaks, some technicians in here, as well as some just guys that I think are going to go pretty high up, especially on my board. We were kind of talking about this in our quick little chat behind the scenes, but there's some guys in here that me and Jerry both really like a lot. So I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of really good bodies in this group. There's a lot of guys that are athletically really, really good. But the other thing about this group I like, there's some dogs in this group. There's some guys that play tough offensive line play, and I like that. And so I would probably preface this as by saying that maybe guys that I have higher or guys that I would probably pick before others might not be the highest rated guys when we're all said and done, but they've got other attributes that I really enjoy, and I think this group has a lot of it.
Yeah, so here's the group, everybody. BJ Williams from Pittsburgh, Chase Bisontis from Texas A&M, Gennings Dunker from Iowa, Ben Taylor-Whitfield from TCU, Xavier Chaplin from Auburn, Austin Barber from Florida, Caleb Tiernan from Northwestern, and then Max Iheanachor, and I don't even think I just did that right, from Arizona State. I'll work on Max's pronunciation when we get to him. We're going to start with BJ Williams from Pittsburgh. Jerry, he's the warm-up for the show. What did you see from BJ Williams?
I like BJ Williams. I think he's a guy that translates well into the NFL. I think he's a guy that'll probably be a sixth man. One of the things that I think is interesting about BJ Williams, I think he's another one of our guys that could possibly be a swing man, not just a guard, but at center as well. I know he doesn't have any tape out there on center, but I know he's a guy that could probably play some center. He has some of those attributes. I like him. He's got a good body. He's got a good anchor. Some of the things he does well, I think he's athletic. I think he's got some range to him. He moves pretty well throughout plays, as far as whether it be in zones and things like that. He's got leverage to him, long arms. He's got the opportunity. He stays clean on the edge. He can torque down blocks. I like what he does. He's got a lot of versatility. And actually, I kind of want to take back the center part of that. I had him a little bit mixed up with their right guard at first. We're talking, this is the tackle here. So, but all those things that I said I like about him. I think he's a guy that fits well. Again, things that, most of the time you're going to hear me talk about it. He needs to improve his hand placement a little bit. Set his angles a little bit better in his blocks, and all these guys tend to play high. Needs to play a little bit lower, but yeah, I think he's a good player. I think he's somebody that can get on a roster. Probably, if someone falls in love with him late day 2, but I think he's probably an early day 3 guy, and realistically probably 4 or 5 guy. But yeah, I think he's a good player. I think. Senior Bowl, if he gets there, combine, those types of things will be something that can move the needle on him, whether it be up or down.
And Owen, where are you on BJ Williams?
So BJ Williams was the right guard, correct? I know, Jerry, you kind of
that's right. Yeah, I actually yeah. Let me rephrase this because I put my notes down. Okay, here we go. Let's start this again. I apologize, Jim. Live television is always tough, but yes.
Well, this is the third Pittsburgh offensive lineman we've discussed,
right? So, and the other, there's a PJ Williams as well. I write notes on all the guys I watch, so I had the notes for PJ Williams up, but I need to talk about BJ Williams. So my bad. Yes, this is the right guard from Pittsburgh. Thank you, Owen, for correcting me. Who does have potential to move inside the center. I like his size, 315, 320, 6'4". His run blocking is his strength. He can generate vertical displacement with his blocks and those types of things. He can double down. He's got strong leg drive. He's a thick lower body guy with good strength, good anchor. You don't bull rush this guy. He's a guy that can sit on the bull rush. He's competitive and tough as well. You can see it in his film and the way he plays. again, needs to fix his pad level a little bit, especially if he translates into center. Haven't seen that on film, but I think at the if he gets into some of these all-star games and things like that, scouts are going to request that he take some snaps. He's not a freak athlete. He's a good athlete, average, but he's not freaky. He probably needs to work on his foot quickness a little bit. Again, hand usage and those types of things, especially if he snaps. You got to be really good with your hands and be able to anticipate and stuff like that. But again, just like the other guy that I thought I was talking about, but I wasn't. He's a round 3 to round 5 guy. And I think that it depends on the situation he's in. I think if he gets in a program where he has time to develop and do those things, I think he'll be fine. But, you're looking at a guy that could be a multi-positional player and be a future starter for somebody's team in the NFL.
And I think we're gonna start a little different today's episode. I know usually me and Jerry kind of in lockstep a bit, but I was a bit lower on Williams through this wash through. So he played right guard. I believe he's a 3-year junior according to Pitt's website. He's been there for 3 years and has started all 3 seasons, or at least participated in all 3 seasons, to the point where he hasn't burned his red shirt yet. I think 6'4" might be a bit generous with how tall he is. I think he has good length, but I do think he looks a little bit shorter on film. But what Jerry was saying was not incorrect per se. He's definitely got that good frame. Has a great anchor, especially when having a guy's in the phone booth and they're trying to go through his body. He's able to lock down. He's got some good hands, being able to replace and do some hand fighting, especially in pass protection. I think I really like him a lot as a pass protector, and I think that sets kind of a semi higher floor, because I do think he's a guy that you stick him on the inside of your offensive line. You expect him to stand guys up, especially 1-techs or 0-techs. If you do move him to center, I think he can be a guy that holds up really well, especially early on in his career in pass protection, just because he has some good reps of that on there so far. He's a decent athlete. I wouldn't say he's good, not great. He can, when they do moving pockets or they have him pull, he definitely doesn't look out of place. But as a guy who's trying to reach cross face and do a lot more zone concepts, I feel like he's just not one of those guys that pops off the screen for you. For me, I think the biggest issue where I had was kind of what Jerry was talking about with one of his positives was I didn't really see a ton of the vertical displacement. I felt like I found myself a lot of times seeing him get a little too high in his stance, not running his feet through the contact, and not being able to generate consistent push. I would expect him, especially with how stout he is as a pass protector with his strength, that's going to translate a bit more to some vertical push there. Maybe it was the games I watched, but especially the stuff that I did see of him, it looked like he got some push there, some places, but other times it was a bit inconsistent, where I was expecting more of a guy that can really move some bodies up front. So I watched a few games where that didn't really happen. I watched the Florida State game specifically because he played against Daryl Jackson Jr., who we covered on our Wednesday podcast, covering the D-line guys, and the NC State one because that was his highest PFF graded game. So if Jerry, you watched any different ones from those, I can definitely go take a look at those. But I'm just a bit lower on him. I have him actually graded similarly to his teammate Ryan Baer, the tackle. They're grouped up in the same area solidly in that day 3 category for me.
And that's fine. I mean, and Owen, you don't have to apologize. I think that's part of the beauty of this whole thing is we like things and we don't like things. But the one thing about Williams that I do like is he's got a good starting point. And I think he does display some power and things of that nature. Then you get better coaching, you get into a system and you can work on those things. But no, don't ever apologize for not liking somebody. I mean, that's part of this, right? I mean, we can't all like the same people, right?
Yeah, I think he's super young too, being that 3-year junior. He's got some starting reps under his belt, so I definitely do think that shows up with his technique. But he's a guy that, I wrote in here, if he goes back, I don't know if there's going to be what else he could do other than maybe get a little bit better with some consistency with pad level and get more time in the weight room to really help with that vertical displacement. Or, he's so young, getting into the NFL at that young of an age, and you can work with those guys in the pros. I'm not sure what, and maybe you can put some more insight to this, Jerry, what would be a better situation for a guy who has that kind of younger career trajectory, and you're kind of seeing a point where they can go to the NFL and be drafted relatively high, or at least drafted in general, but they have the option to go back and maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling athletically, but where you'd see a lot of guys who are maybe not as polished technically but have the high athletic ceiling. That's what you would suggest for them to go back. Right. Where a guy like Williams, it's not really that case.
The thing about Williams is if he gets drafted high enough, obviously they'll protect him and keep him on a roster. But honestly, you probably look at this kid as like, even if he's on your roster, like a Chase Lunt in Buffalo or somebody like that, he's going to be inactive every week, and he's going to be given the chance to develop like a practice squad player. You know, one thing about him in doing some cross notes and stuff and look at some of his background, he is a multi-year starter at Pitt, and he was the first true freshman OL starter in Pitt in about a decade. So he did play as a true freshman. So he is young, but he's got a lot of snaps under his belt. And I think he's a guy that can get better. I really do. But the thing that intrigues me about him is I do believe he's got some center translation. I just need to see some game reps of it. And I think that if he does go ahead and declare, if he goes to one of these all-star games, that'll be requested.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out, we've covered Ryan Baer, who was a tackle, and I believe we projected him inside the guard on a prior podcast. Lyndon Cooper, who is the Pittsburgh center, and now BJ Williams. And I believe all three of those guys can get a return to school.
Right.
None of
Lyndon
them,
Cooper, I think Lyndon Cooper can't.
Yeah, I think the center has to
If I'm correct, but the other guys can.
Okay.
Which may open up a position for him to slide inside if he does return with BJ Williams.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So, Owen, I sent you a Bills mock draft earlier, and I had Chase Bisontis in round 4, and your immediate reaction was that was a steal.
Yes, I agree 1,000,000%.
Yeah. So, Owen, go ahead and set Jerry up because we know it may be difficult to top Jerry on this one.
Yeah, I think Bisontis. So I'm going to give a good run at it because I think, you know, we talked about a little bit in the back scenes. This was the guy that Jerry came in like, oh, I'm high on one of these guys. And we both ended up being super high on the same guy, which is really cool. With Bisontis, the other interior offensive lineman for A&M, the other guard, a guy who I think has a ton of physical tools, but I think maybe isn't a clean fit to multiple, you know, different versatile when it comes to schematic stuff. I think you can probably find him a clean fit in one spot over the other, but everything else I really love about him. He's a high-level pass protector. I like his technique to frame up and mirror guys, especially when he's inside and working in that phone booth and he's trying to work off of one-on-one battles in the pass protection, working with his hands and his feet. I really like his technique, especially with resetting his hands, getting a punch in there and controlling that inside, which if you've watched some of the other previous episodes, it's a big thing we talk about is, especially with some of these guys with losing some of their anchor, especially in the interior where they're going to have the most straight line path to the quarterback. You want to be able to establish that inside control, and I think Bisontis does a great job with that. I think he's a great move blocker for me. He can move well. He's got a nasty fight to him where he's going to want to bury guys. So even if I don't think he's maybe the most powerful guy, I do think he has some good power. But we've got some other guys on this list that we're going to talk about that are like absolute like mammoth human beings. He's not up to that standard, but he has good feet, ability, has size, he's able to run through guys' faces, keeps his feet generating and moving, and has a ton of athleticism to be able to work in any kind of those zone areas. So I really love him a lot as a pass protector right away. I like him as an ability to move around and be able to reach block and get into the second level and then latch and attack and really get guys into the ground and bury them. I do think that I'm maybe not as high on him as Jerry is going to be with when it comes to his ability to just be a pure people mover on the line. But for me, he's got all the things I look for athletically, technically, and does have that nasty that allows to compensate for some of that stuff. So I think he's an all-around great player. And just to plant my flag for a little bit before Jerry goes and takes it off running, of the guys we have graded that are pure interior offensive line players, he is my interior offensive line number 1, just barely beating out Vega from Penn State as my interior offensive line 2 player.
And that's a good call. I would probably say as an overall prospect on a couple of things, I would keep Vega probably rated a little bit higher, but I will say this. As of now, through the weeks we've been doing this, Chase Bisontis is my favorite offensive lineman that I've evaluated at any position at any level. I know that most people have other linemen rated much higher. If I'm a general manager, I am finding a way to draft this kid, and he will be on my football team because the things he does that a lot of other players don't do stand out immensely, and that is play with an absolute physical, nasty, competitive edge, and he's doing it in the SEC. This isn't the MAC. This is the SEC that he's doing it at. You know, a former tackle that moved inside. He is kind of long for a guard. He's 6'5", 6'6", but his pad level is low. His movement is well and efficient. He's really, really calm in pass protection. You see his feet are calm. His hands are strong. His punch is good. There's no wasted motion. He can run block with power. He's got lower body strength. He can do whatever. You want to go vertical, he'll go vertical. You run doubles, he'll down block. He'll do whatever you need him to do. I think he's a guy at the next level that he is a true blue. If he's not starting at guard, and even if you have to, he could be a left guard, right tackle, and a pinch swing guy. I think he can get you out of games very, very well. Just seeing that, it's funny, some guys have to move inside because of athletic ability. I think Bisontis probably moved inside because of they maybe recruited guys elsewhere, and how do you fit your best five on the field? And they moved him inside the guard, and he's an absolute ass kicker. I don't see a ton of weaknesses on him. Did some digging on him, and there's some durability issues you need to monitor. I guess he's had some lower leg injuries. Again, I talked about it. He's a tall guard, but I didn't see much rise out of his pad level. He plays in the lower half. And, again, he's extremely efficient in his movement. And that physical – when you watch the film, and it's something I try to tell young guys all the time, it's the same thing in high school. You know, there's only so many high school guys that go on and play Division I college football, and they're like, well, what's the one thing I can do that'll make me stand out? It's how you finish and how you play. And this was one of the first guys I've seen when I flipped the tape on. I'm like, that dude gets it. And you want to talk about a tone setter. I mean, I am finding a way as a general manager to draft this kid. I don't care if I've got two good starting guards. I will find a way to pick him. And if he's in round 4, people didn't do their homework, because I don't think he'll be around at round 4. I think he's got a chance to go day 2. And if not day 2, the top half of day 3. He's going to make somebody a really good offensive lineman. And again, it's not just his natural athletic abilities. It's the fact of how he plays that gets me so excited about this kid.
Yeah, I think to add a little background information to what Jerry was talking about, a true freshman starter at right tackle for Texas A&M, ends up kicking inside to guard his sophomore, now his true junior year, just because they think they want to get their best 5 on the field there. And to talk about what you're talking about, the tone setting thing, I think it was a Notre Dame game, which was the first game I watched. I was like 3 plays in, and I didn't really know anything about Bisontis. Most of the time I'm getting these names from Jim, and I don't know much about who these guys are, how highly they're rated. Some of the bigger names I do, but Bisontis was not one of them. And I think it was a play where he was asked to climb to the second level. He helped Chip with his double team climb to the second level and just cleans the clock out of one of the linebackers up there. Absolutely blows the dude up. And I was like, all right, you have my attention, sir. Now I am bought in. And I watched probably the most tape of any of the guys here on Bisontis, just because there was a lot of those plays where it's like, I'm watching him in pass protection. He's technically clean. He's matching. His feet are active. And then now he's going downhill, and he's absolutely burying dudes, especially in the second level with how good of an athlete he is. And he just has that size. He's able just to absolutely punch dudes in the mouth and throw them around. And it's so much fun. It's such fun film to watch.
Just, like I said, I did some digging and I looked at some stuff, and, some people got him projected as a late round 1. Maybe mid-round 2. I think round 1 would probably be surprising to me, but it wouldn't be shocking to me. But I could see mid-round 2. I could see somewhere in round 2 and definitely early round 3. The thing about it, the way he plays is, a lot of these guys will say, well, what do you do against really good defensive linemen? Well, one of the things you do is you get them so mad at you that they don't care where the football is, that all they worry about is trying to beat you up. And Bisontis is one of those guys. He could get you so irritated that you give a rat's where the ball is. You just want to go ahead and try to hit him. So yeah, he's my favorite player so far that we've looked at. I've got him probably right there as my top guard. I probably still give the guy from Penn State a little bit of the edge there, just because of ceiling with him, because he's the opposite. He's just he's newer to football than a lot, and is already showing what he's showing. He could be a generational type of player if he develops the way people think he can. But Bisontis is right there with him.
Yeah, and to your point about the first round hype, Jerry, and people talk about him being a first round, I have Bisontis as right now without the positional multipliers for valuing tackles and other guys over guards. He's my 16th overall player at the moment. And Vega from Penn State, kind of like you were saying, a bit more raw, but super high ceiling when it comes to power and athleticism and all like the tools you need to be an elite player, but just is lacking more on the technical side, whereas Bisontis is ahead of him there. He's my 20th ranked player. So I have them pretty close in grade. I was just favoring Bisontis because he's a bit more polished right now over Vega.
Yep.
Okay. Jennings dunker, Trevor Sikkema from NFL Stock Exchange had dunker in his top 10 overall players in the draft. But then you can go watch other draft podcasts and they're going to be a little bit lower on dunker. Jerry, where are you on Jennings dunker from Iowa right now?
Guard, and guard. He is a run mauling guard. He is, for all the WRFs in the world, there's about 10 or 15 Iowa linemen that have been rated very, very highly and drafted very, very highly that have flamed out. I think with Dunker, you have to look at what he does well and decide that when you pick him, you're going to play him at guard and you're going to let him just go out there in a run-heavy scheme and let him absolutely maul people. I mean, the guy's massive. He's 6'5". They say 315, 316. He looks even bigger than that. He's a bit robotic out at right tackle. He's kind of stiff. I mean, his foot quickness is adequate, but he doesn't look fluid in his drive catch phase and his pass sets. He can struggle with some of the speed guys and the bend guys because he's out. It's hard sometimes when you see some Iowa guys, you think they're a bit stiff, but they're just so muscled up, it's hard to move. But he does come off a bit stiff on film, and I think a lot of it has to do with not just hip flexibility, but also ankle flexibility, which a lot of people don't bring into play. But ankle flexibility is very, very important in play. I think it affects maybe his redirect and recovery, some of that inflexibility in his hips and ankles. But he can get wide in his hands because he's just so big and strong. He's used to grabbing or kind of swinging his arms as opposed to punching. And, that lack of recovery due to being a marginal athlete at right tackle can lead to being overextended and, chasing speed guys and things like that. But when you get to the good things, you talk about the leg drive and the run game skills and just the fact that he's coached by an NFL guy. One of the best NFL O-line coaches that's ever there is his head coach is Kirk Ferentz. And Kirk Ferentz is the guy that started that whole Baltimore thing. He was the line coach at Baltimore for a long, long time. And while they have offensive line coaches, they teach the way that Ferentz wants them to be taught, which is they step and run off the ball. There is none of this, have your feet outside your shoulders and duck walk or short chops or whatever. They're running off the ball to maul you. And he's got a good motor. He is competitive. He's got anchor and all that stuff. But I just think he's a guy that you can put in at guard, has durability, has strength and power in the right type of running the ball system, which is, to me, would be more inside zone and gap scheme as opposed to outside zone. I think he'd be just fine. So I look at him right now. I know some people have him super, super high. I think he's probably an early day 3 guy somewhere in, like we've talked about with a lot of these guys in that early day 3 range. But with the right team and the right scheme, he could be very productive.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be higher on a guy like Dunker. So there's another player we were just talking about with Bisontis and Vega that were my 16th and 20th overall player. Dunker is my 27th overall player right now, and that's just truly because I'm grading him as he's going to be a guard. He's going to be a guard. I like maybe if you need a pinch hit at right tackle to get you out of a game because he has that experience, you put him out there and you're just going to run the ball the rest of the game out. I would maybe think about him, but if you have other guys that are better suited to play in space and have that lack of length issue, there's going to be you're going to go with your guys that you have in place there over him. But as a guy that you're going to plug and play as an interior blocker, especially in an inside zone gap scheme like Jerry was talking about, Dunker is a guy that I don't have a lot of question marks around when it comes to him coming in and being able to play at the NFL level and be a guy that can come out, clear out lanes, be a dude that helps you set the tone, establish running lanes. If you have him next to a good right tackle, you're going to be able to just run off that right side the entire time out the gates. Now he's going to need some polish, need some cleaning up when it comes to pass protection, but I felt like a lot of his best reps in pass protection while out at tackle was when the end or the edge tried to reduce their angle and go inside on him. He was able to step in, bear down, and play more of that in the phone booth style where he's not worrying about them attacking the outside, setting up at that inside counter. He's just like, all right, cool, we're going to try to play dirty. I can play dirty. I can anchor down, throw hands with you in this tight space, and you're not going to win. So for a guy that once you limit the space, we'll have a lot of the question marks I have about him at tackle go away. And a lot of the things that I already love about him, I think are going to continue to get better and still be good once you put him in on the inside. He's a guy that I can really see coming out and being a player that goes like that day to a team that needs a guy to come in and, they're set a new identity with their running game, need a starter at guard, and they're looking to take a swing at a guy in day 2 to be able to step in and at least do part of the job at an NFL starter level, which is going to be that run blocking and that scheme, and then work with and smooth out some of the bumps that are going to come with him transitioning inside and still polishing up his pass protection. So for a guy that I think has day 1 starter potential when it comes to being at guard, I think that's what sets him above a lot of the other guys we talked about that maybe have a bit more warts and pause when I'm thinking about taking them maybe like round 2, which is where I have Dunker ended up graded as a player.
The thing about the Iowa linemen is they're extremely trained up. I mean, they're coached at an NFL level in college. They're extremely trained up in their techniques and in the weight room. And the thing about Iowa linemen is they are usually plug and play, but what you see is what you're going to get. There's not much development or not room for development out of some of these guys just because they are so coached up and so, polished as coming out of college. So that's the only thing sometimes that worries me about some of these guys is really the ceiling maybe being a little bit lower just because you don't get the development or upside out of some of them because they're already maxed out by the time they get out of school.
Yeah, and I think the move in from tackle to guard really, because you're right. If this was a guy that played guard at Iowa and we saw what he can do, and I still have those question marks, especially coming out of Iowa, I may be a bit less optimistic about him being able to polish that up. But a lot of this is because he's going to be transferring in from outside to in. It's going to be like, okay, that's going to clean up there. That's going to clean up there. He's going to be a bit more comfortable. And just seeing a guy who already has a lot of the idea of how it's supposed to work, get into a position where he's more comfortable and less challenged by stuff that physically limits him that he just can't do at the NFL level, I think will give you that smidgen of a higher ceiling than you get from a guy that comes out of Iowa that you've already kind of seen the proof in the pudding when it comes to what his deficiencies are, what his pluses are, and knowing that you're not going to be able to pull much more out of him.
Remember this in April. I'm calling my shot. He'll get drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers.
Okay. All right.
I'm calling my shot.
Okay.
This has Jim Harbaugh written all over it.
And next week, we're covering 2 more Iowa players. So this is the first of 3 Iowa offensive linemen. Next week, Logan Jones and Bo Stevens. Logan Jones, the center, Bo Stevens, the guard, will be on the podcast. So
they're my favorite college offensive line. Between them and Notre Dame, it's refreshing to actually watch offensive lines in college play like pro teams and actually teach pro techniques and get 3-point stances a lot.
Okay. So now we're pivoting to some possible offensive tackle prospects. I haven't heard too much about Ben Taylor-Whitfield from TCU since summer scouting. Owen, what did you see on the TCU tackle?
This is going to be a guy that I'm going to end up coming in at the end of this saying he needs to go back to school. Like that's my big roundabout with this. Being 6'6", 300, I think he can definitely pack on some more weight. He's clearly this gigantic super athlete that like flies around And you can definitely see, like, he just moves different than some of the other guys. Like, even the guys we watched here that are good athletes, he just moves differently than a lot of guys you're going to see. And he looks like he's built like out of this stone. And I think he can even add on some more muscle there and beef up a bit more, because there's a lot of plays where, like, he's in the right position, he's able to beat guys to the spot and be absolutely perfect with where he's supposed to be positioned to win the rep. He just either technically his feet narrow, or his hands are in the wrong spot, or he just is lacking that natural power in his frame right now, where I think he's a bit underdeveloped. So a lot of plays, like even against Colorado, there's like, there's some edge rushers on that team I do like from watching summer scouting, but he was getting flat backed by dudes and getting kind of embarrassed by some lower level guys that we're talking about in the draft, like late day 3 type prospects. Whereas this guy is definitely the better athlete against those level of caliber players. He should be absolutely dominating them. But for me, he's just a guy that he got put out there because he's 6'6", 300 and can move like that. And they're like, we'll live with what happens because we know that he can go out there and make some plays that you do see where, like, he's flying out in the open field, making some big plays, flattening smaller guys, being able to just be a big game wrecker, but he just plays so out of control, as Jerry usually says for some of these guys where they're these big super athletes. Like, they don't have to hone it in and really be measured and understand what they're doing. They can just fly around and be super athletes that there's not much that you really see from him when it comes to being able to play at an NFL tackle right now. So if he can go back to school, maybe potentially transfer to another school where maybe they can sit him down and refine his technique a bit more, because I think TCU is comfortable with where they have him right now, just being able to go out there and do what he's doing. This is definitely a guy that can definitely grow more physically and then technically as well while being in school before coming into the NFL and setting the baseline just a little bit higher on his floor before getting selected, because I think if he does do that, he can go a lot higher than what we're going to project him right now coming out after this season.
What Owen said. I think you look at this guy and what you're doing is you're projecting more than looking at the production that you've seen on film. And I think, like Owen, I agree. He needs to go back and put another consistent season on film that could maximize where he gets drafted. He's prototypical in everything as far as his size. I mean, he's a prototypical tackle. He's long. He's 300, but he looks skinny. He's got good quickness, good movement for his size. He's comfortable moving. His length shows up a lot in his pass protection. He is a vertical pass setter, and he does a good job of it. He's comfortable in space and running screens and things. He does get out of control and over the front of his feet and fall off of blocks because of that out of control style of play. I think he's a guy that, weakness-wise, you look at maybe his techniques. He does have some inconsistent technique. His hands, again, he's got to have better hand placement and timing. Anchor's adequate, but it's not great. Again, going back and putting more weight on. I'm actually good friends with his strength coach at TCU, Mudiamvita Kazadi, who played at Tulsa and played in Buffalo and for the Rams in the NFL, who's an absolute house. If you ever watch TCU, just look for the angry guy on the sideline, and that's Kaz. But, being in with Kaz another year will help him because he will put weight on him. But, right now, if he's to come out, I think he's late day 3, maybe a priority free agent, just because of that lack of consistency on film. But, if he comes back and puts another good season on film, and the one thing I think he really has to work on, and a couple of these other guys are going to evaluate it in the same position, run game wise, he's more positional blocker than he is an actual he's a position and wall guy than he is a true displacement guy. And that comes with being stronger and being more physical. So, yeah, I mean, just look at him, prototype. But there's a lot of question marks right now. Anything you say about him is purely, as far as his resume goes, is purely speculation as opposed to really true hardcore being able to project where he is because of what you've seen.
Yeah, he reminds me of another former TCU tackle who did transferring out when he went back to school, which was Tyler Guyton, who was at TCU as like a hybrid tight end, 6'7" dude who just could fly around, but he was still super undercooked when it came to being able to play tackle. And then he ends up transferring to Oklahoma, getting that change of scenery, and then putting it all together there. It ends up being a first-round pick. So not saying Taylor-Whitfield needs to go to a different school, because I do think his biggest concern for me right now would just to be adding that weight. And as Jerry talked about, they have a good strength and conditioning program there. My former DPP at Buffalo was started his job out was at TCU back when they had the Max Dugan days, probably when Guyton was there as well, and they haven't done a lot of turnover since then with their staff. So I've got a lot of rave reviews about that staff down there. So I do think that he's in a place where if he is able to add that physical dimension to his game, he could go back there and still get to a point where he is shooting up those draft boards because he has that talent. But he is a guy that is in that path or in that mold of recruit that TCU has gone after, which is these super athletes, prototypes at tackle that if they do end up getting away from them and going to an SEC school like an Oklahoma or somewhere like that if they can get their hands on him, I think he can definitely be a dude who has the talent to be like a guy we talk about next year that's in those round 2, round 1 discussions.
I think he's a kind of a poster child for the problem with college football right now, an offensive lineman. They're not so much worried about developing anymore. They want guys that are big, that can move, and then the rest will take care of itself. Because in most cases, a big physical athlete will win more than a guy that's a technician or does things the right way. So you get a lot of these players, and it seems every week we're talking about the same type of dudes. They've got the size and everything, but they're raw technique-wise or raw with finish, things like that. That's why when you get a guy like Bisontis, they just stick out so much, because they're so well developed. And yeah, I think it's kind of the way of college football nowadays with the portal and everything. You don't see the development at the offensive line position except for like the Iowas and Notre Dames that you used to in college football.
Okay, and TCU will have a lot of players that we're going to talk about in next year's draft on offense. Okay. Because they have Josh Hoover, and then I believe Jordan Dwyer has another year of eligibility at wide receiver. So there's going to be a few TCU players we've podcasted on in this cycle, but are probably getting a return to school as well. Another player I heard a lot about in the summer, and then nobody's really talking about Xavier Chaplin now. Jerry, what did you have on Xavier Chaplin from Auburn?
Underwhelming. Size and physicality, yes. I think he's huge. I think he's a guy that will be playing guard at the next level. I wasn't really overwhelmed by how he played. Now he showed that rare size and length and all those things as far as an athlete. He's got better movement than you would expect for a man that's probably, he's listed at like 348. I bet he's probably 360. He is a big man, so he does move well for it. But I think he's going to kick inside and be a guard, and definitely not anywhere near as polished as Dunker. But I see that kind of projection for him of going inside. He is a multi-year starter, but he's still raw. I mean, his techniques are raw. His feet, his steps are raw. His hands placement and being in sync are not very good. He can overset some of the speed rushers, get too head up the outside and invite the inside stuff, which he has problems redirecting and correcting that just because of he's so dang big. He probably needs to lose some weight at the next level. He does have anchor. He does have some leverage, but can be a bit inconsistent. Obviously, running game-wise is probably where he'd shine the most. He can generate some movement on some down blocks and double teams, but then he'll fall off because he gets too high and gets out of sorts. But, tries to finish, does show a little bit of competitiveness, but just seemed to be a bit raw and inexperienced. I know some people really, really like him. If they do, I'd have to think it's because of how big he is. If he does play tackle at the next level, and I think he could play tackle if he had to, be a right tackle, and again, to be at more of a pared down size than 350 or more than he already is. So we'll see what happens with him. The Senior Bowl and those types of things, if he goes, will be really important. His testing in Indianapolis will be very, very important. But I was expecting more out of him with his physical presence. But he's definitely got a lot of things to work on right now, to me anyway. I mean, some people have him projected really high. I would say probably early day 3, day 4, or day 3, round 4 or 5, something like that, with a lot of work to do on technique and just getting him to a weight that he can function in the NFL.
Yeah, I think especially with Jim, you the point you brought up is that people were talking about a lot in the summer scouting process and not so much now. I think is the story of him as a player, because I did cover him a bit in the summer. I didn't do a full deep dive on him. I only got a passing glance at some of his games. And I went back and watched some of the older tape today. I said that Bisontis was the guy I watched the most film on. I lied. Chaplin, it definitely is, because I went back and watched some of his Virginia Tech tape, because a lot of the stuff I saw at Auburn, I remember in just the small brief snippets I got before diving into him today, was not really what I remember him being as. And I also heard a ton of the hype, and I was like, I can't believe I'm not like super there with him, because right now at Auburn, you see a guy bends at the hips a lot. It's kind of inflexible in the lower half. I think because of Auburn's RPO heavy system, he doesn't run his feet through contact as much as you love to see and have him bury guys. He's a large. I have in my write up here just the word mammoth capitalized, because he's just massive and has like this gravitational pull to him when you watch him on tape, where he could play tackle in the NFL. I think that's probably where he would have to play at the moment, just I think he's a little too inflexible at the moment to play guard. And I think it's going to have to be in an RPO heavy scheme as a right tackle, where yes, he's not smooth with change of direction or being able to do traditional pass sets. He doesn't have the footwork there, and he can't really marry his hands to his lower half, but he's got the size. And if he does get his hands on you, he can really reach out and weaponize that length at times. That edge rushers are either going to try to go through his chest, and he's just not going to budge because he's such a big man. Or if you're going to be trying to beat him with the speed, because he has the length and the size, you're going to have to widen out your angles a bit. And now you're artificially giving that quarterback some more time and space to move around and throw, because you're having to widen out so much to lessen your angle, because he's such just a big monster outside. So he's a guy that I can see the elements of it working. And when you go back and throw on the Virginia Tech tape, you see a lot more like his graded out plays for like his zone blocking and things like that are a lot higher, and you don't see any of those for Auburn. Like you can go back through and kind of sort them through by which is what the type of scheme is, and all the ones where it's a plus rep at a zone blocking skill is all from his Virginia Tech days, where he is getting out of his stance and firing out and running his feet through contact, climbing to that second level, being that guy you really kind of expect from being that size and having some rare movement for that size. You can see that with that older tape. When it comes to Auburn, because maybe it's an RPO heavy scheme, or maybe because he's adding more weight on, he does seem to be a bit more out of shape, especially in like the fourth quarter. He gets even more sloppy than he normally is. I do think that the change of scenery has not helped him, but he does have, the size. He does have natural power just from being that size. And like I said, teams are going to have to play him differently because of that if he is out of tackle. So you're at worst getting a guy that, if you're running a heavy RPO scheme, or you just need like a band-aid at right tackle, kind of in the similar mold of like the DeJuan Jones of the past. I think Falele was the guy from Minnesota that's not playing guard for the Ravens, who's 6'8", but was able to transition to guard. Those types of players where you're like, okay, they do not have the foot speed to be a traditional tackle in the NFL. Can they be like a hybrid player and eventually kick inside despite being so massive? But for me, Chaplin, the move to Auburn was not the right decision for him, even though it's going up from Virginia Tech to the SEC. He just looked a lot more comfortable in that scheme, was able to show off a lot more while he was there. So a guy that's dropped off a bit, and I can definitely see why he's not really getting as much hype. I graded him out similarly where Jerry was, early day 3, round 4, just because you have a lot of those things. You have some older tape that really shows some potential, but it's just a player that has a lot of question marks right now that I don't see super easy fixes without rigorous conditioning and reworking a lot of his traits despite being like a 5-year player in college.
And I think you're 100% correct. This goes right back to what I was talking about with the last prospect, the kid from TCU. Again, this is a system. This is a system that doesn't care about techniques and a lot of things. They care about getting the ball out quick in the RPO system, and I just need a really big man that can move a little bit and eat up space. And I watched a lot of film of him playing Oklahoma, because I knew Oklahoma with R. Mason Thomas and Wine and some of those guys they have at defensive end would put some stress on them. And these limitations really stuck out against superior athletes at the defensive end position. But again, he makes the move to Auburn in the SEC, but actually gets into a system that I think, like Owen said, probably hurt him more than helped him. He'd have been better just staying at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, he got his Auburn quarterback absolutely murdered by R. Mason Thomas in that one clip where he jumps and rides his back, and he's just like, "Yeah, all I can do is help you up. Hope you're not hurt," because I absolutely blew that rep there.
Right, exactly.
Okay, Newt, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you tomorrow night. So if you're not familiar with Newt podcast with Owen Wednesday nights in the same time slot. Okay, so next player, Austin Barber from Florida. There were people in summer scouting that were mocking him in round 1, and I know that has cooled off considerably. But Jerry, what did you see from Austin Barber, the tackle from Florida?
I see a big, long, athletic freak is what I see. I mean, this guy has just effortless movement. He is really comfortable in space. One of the more narrow-built offensive linemen you'll see has a body type like Spencer Brown. He's not really wide in the shoulders. He's a more narrower type player, but he is long. He is light. He's not super thick. But his efficiency with his feet and his smooth kick slide and lateral agility really, really stand out. He does use his length well. His hand placement's usually pretty clean. He does display some independent hand usage. I think his pass pro is really good, and we know that the league really emphasizes pass protection, and he's a guy that can definitely play left tackle, right tackle, wherever they have a hole that they need filled. He would be a guy to step in and do it. He's also really good on the move and screens. If you're running some tunnel-type screens where you're going to take that tackle and run them straight out to the flat to try to kick out the corner, he does that very well too. Because of his build, he's not a people mover. He's a wall guy. He's a seal guy, a steer guy, and gets movement with his athleticism. So he'll get his body position, wall off, and when that defensive lineman tries to adjust and counter to get in on the play, he's very, very athletic, has a very good feel, will run his feet and be able to finish that way. I don't think he's a particularly nasty type lineman. He's kind of more of the Nouveau style, which is the big, long, athletic dudes that play their position and do their thing, but he's not, doesn't display really much ill temperament on film, so to speak. But, man, you want to talk about a guy to bring in if you're in a pass-heavy offense that also runs a ton of outside zone. I think this guy is about as clean a projection as you can get. I think he's really good. I don't know where he goes. I would say probably more along the lines of round 2, somewhere in there. I think he'd be a round 2 value if people are down on his frame or his girth. Or if there's not a run on offensive lineman early, maybe he slips to early day 3. But I think he's got the potential to be a starting caliber type tackle in the league. And for teams that really covet someone that's able to sit on his hips and get his hips down and back, that's flexible, that can run and move, and they're not worried about vertical movement. They're more worried about lateral displacement, i.e. the Bills. I think he's a guy that can do it. But, I think one of the things that would really set him apart, but you don't see it on that film, is if he went and hung out with Bisontis a little bit and got a little bit of that edge to him. That's probably the only thing right now besides that natural ability to move people vertically that I see him missing. I think he's a very good prospect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why Jim, you say that the first round hype is cooled off for him. Where do you see him locked a lot more now, currently?
So Austin Barber was covered Saturday by Anthony Russo and Drew. They both had him top 100. But for example, Alex from Hail Mary Sports is out on him as a tackle completely and is saying, okay, if he's a guard, then that's day 3. But
why would you move this guy to guard? I understand length at guard, and I get that, but usually guys that go inside and play guard usually have some thickness to them and have some guard type properties. I don't see that out of him right now. I mean, could he? Probably. But when one of your biggest weaknesses is being able to physically move somebody to point A to point B with physical power and strength, that doesn't usually translate to guard. I just know that one of the biggest attributes of linemen, and when they find them, they covet them, is being able to block the outside pass rush. This guy can do that for days, and it's funny all of a sudden, and it's different nowadays because these guys make so much in NIL, but, all of a sudden you're getting a fat paycheck. You might learn how to be a little bit nasty and do some different things and work on some stuff. I guess the biggest question to me would be if I saw him physically at the combine when he's in the room standing up on the stage in a pair of shorts, can I project him, as far as how much weight he could put on or how much size he could put on? I think it was Chip Kelly was a big proponent of, he would actually do, when the scouts went out and evaluated talent, they would do ankle, knee and wrist circumference measurements. And he had some kind of wacky formula that he felt that, if you had X amount of size in your knees or your ankles, then you could put X amount of weight on safely without it being an injury issue. That I know that because when he was in Philadelphia, he drafted Lane Johnson, and that was one of the big things about Lane Johnson because, again, another tall, longer guy. Now he's gotten actually bigger in the pros, but wanting to see if he could put that weight on. But I don't know, Owen. Your thoughts on him kicking the guard? I think to move him to guard is wasting his best attributes.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in step with everything Jerry said with his evaluation. I think he's a top 50 player for me as a tackle. Like, he's a player that looks comfortable playing on the outside. Some of the reps that he loses, like he had a 0.0 PFF grade in pass blocking against Texas A&M. They just have some dogs over there. It was not his best hour, but like even against like Miami when he was playing against Ruben Bain and Mesidor, some of the plays were like he got beat. I feel like he resorted back a little bit to the two-hand punch, and he wasn't really working independently with his hands, which you can continue to work on. But like movement ability, as Jerry was talking about, I think he can generate a little bit more vertical push than Jerry was saying, just because I think he's got some good leg drive and ability to activate his feet and keep his feet active through the contact. Like, he's not naturally this big, strong guy, which we'll see with a Chaplin we talked before. He can just lean into dudes and move them because he's so big. But Barber needs to actually put some work in to get those guys to move. I don't think he's going to be a guy that gets to the second level and buries anybody, but he's going to be a guy that can, operate in an offense where they're asking him to work through double teams or down block and take out a guy and at least temporary wall him off for that role. So I do think, for me, he fits a lot of categories kind of all over. I don't think he's an elite athlete or elite at a lot of things, but I do think he's solid all around. He reminds me a lot of last year's class with Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College, where I was higher on him. He ends up going in the second round to the Bears, except I don't think Barber has the length questions that Trapilo had or the anchor questions, because he kind of played a little taller and a little shorter arm, giving up that chest. Barber's able to kind of play with that totally. So I like him even better than I had Trapilo last year. So he's a guy that you take him in the 30s in round 2. I'm totally happy with that spot. That's where a team that, if you want to invest in tackle, but you don't have, maybe you have other options that you're taking with the top pick, or you maybe have to draft the quarterback in the first round, come back around and hit off the tackle spot. You can't do much worse, or you can't do much better than Barber at the top of that second round.
Okay. I think that a lot of it too, Jim, real quick, I just want to say, like, when you talk about his run blocking, I think he's really good in reach blocks, cutoff blocks, climbing second level, those types of things. He's decent in some head-on stuff and zone and everything, but I think his attributes really lend him to be that guy that can reach block, outside zone, get on that outside aiming point, cutoffs on the backside, scoop guys out, and then also climbing second level. So, again, I think he is a team-specific or, style-specific person. I don't think he translates across every team, but I think he does a lot of things well with some of these pro teams are doing nowadays.
Yeah.
So, Jerry, between Drew Shelton, who's the offensive tackle from Penn State, and Austin Barber, which prospect do you like more?
I like Shelton better. I think Shelton's got the play more under control, and I think Shelton's less experienced, but I think Shelton's ceiling is a lot higher than Barber's. I think Shelton, he's got a chance to be something special. And I think Barber has a chance to be really good too. I just think that Shelton's got more potential to be that, possibly end up being that Pro Bowl kind of guy, so to speak.
Okay. Owen, Isaiah World from Oregon or Austin Barber, who do you have graded higher?
I have World higher, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yes, I have World graded higher, and I have Shelton graded higher. Just because, and that was going to be definitely the player I was going to ask you, Jim, or I was going to ask Jerry that same question with Shelton, comparing him to Barber, because I have them graded pretty similarly, but I have Shelton just a tick higher. World I have higher because he got a lot more of those physical traits where he can move people, and has all the length. Like, he has these elite traits, whereas I think Barber doesn't have anything like elite in his toolkit, but he's just solid to great at some of the other stuff all across the board. With Shelton, it's just kind of the same thing with as Barber, where he's like a good athlete. He's a natural pass blocker, but with Shelton, he has some flashes of that one-on-one power, and he's 306 compared to 314 with Barber. And I think Shelton has the frame to add on a bit more, kind of like what Jerry was talking about, where if you're looking at these two in the underwear Olympics, I think you can look at Shelton as a guy that can pack on some more weight and really develop that one-on-one power more so than you're trusting a guy like Barber can.
Yeah, I think you got to look at eventual potential in 3 years. You know, where are these guys in 3 years as opposed to where are they right now?
Yep. And then Jerry, last week we covered PJ Williams from SMU. So that's
that's what I was talking about. Yes, PJ Williams, who I like quite a bit.
Yeah. Do you like Barber more than PJ Williams?
I like Barber as a left tackle more than PJ Williams, but I like PJ Williams as a right tackle. I think PJ Williams is a really good prototype right tackle. We're going to talk about another guy here in a little bit that I think is the same type of player as PJ Williams, and I'll let you pronounce his last name. But I think those guys are similar. But yeah, I don't think Barber is your prototypical power side right tackle. I think he's a definite. When he comes in the league, he's going to be a left tackle, and that's where they're going to keep him. And if he has to play right in a pinch because they need him there, or he's in with a team that wants the right and the left side to look the same, then play him over there. But if you're looking for that power guy that also has a lot of athleticism but also can move people vertically and get after it, I like PJ Williams more than I like Austin Barber.
Okay. And then do you like Caleb Tiernan more than Austin Barber, Jerry?
I do like Caleb Tiernan, but I think right now, a lot of people were projecting him as one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest, offensive line projections in the league. I think he will be a left tackle. I think he's got more size, more girth, more strength, all those things. I believe that he's got I think he's got some technique stuff that he really needs to clean up. And a lot of it has to do with his punch sequence and how he punches, his style, and it causes him to lurch forward and roll his shoulders forward. And what I'm wondering is, with him, I want to see when he gets under the bar with 225, how many times he does 225. Because while I think his lower half is more than ample, I wonder how much upper body strength he actually has. Because I think some of his bad body positions and stuff are due to him double hand punching and loading up and getting forward as opposed to staying back and those types of things. But I think he's a really good player. I think he's probably a first-round player, extremely intelligent player. You can see it in film. I think his run blocking is really, really good. I think he's got great run blocking technique. He can easily, come off of double teams, work to the second level. I do think his pass protection is good. I think he's got good sets. He's got good feet. I think if he can clean up that punch sequence, which would keep him from lurching forward and almost cause him to be a waist bender, although I know he's highly flexible, and he gets away from that, it'll help him. Because I think some of these guys, like when we were talking about the last guy, we were talking about Barber, I think the types of rushers that give some of these guys fits are your speed to power guys. They got that speed and they want to drive catch and they're fine mirroring guys wide. But all of a sudden, those speed to power guys, they get you to that point to where you got to make a decision. And if you don't have those feet set, they can turn it into power, get downhill real quick and give you some fits. But I think he's a day one left tackle. I think he'll make a lot of money playing left tackle. Like I said, though, he still has some issues. And if you want to nitpick, maybe his foot quickness is not elite, but it's more than adequate. I don't think it's a hindrance to him. Because he's 6'7", he can get a little bit tall, especially in pass pro, which causes some of those problems. I don't think he's a mauler, but I think he's more than just a position guy. I think he can move some people around and things like that. But I think he's got a really high ceiling. He's pro ready. He can play. He's going to lose some reps. He's going to learn he's going to learn in the fire. But very good prospect, and I think he'll probably end up being a first-round pick.
So I'm probably going to beat Jim to his major question he's going to have for Jerry, because I don't think Jerry, unless Jerry already knows this data point, but just to get some of the things out of the way with my eval before I ask the question. I agree with Jerry a lot of stuff. Technically with his feet, I like a lot of it. As a movement guy, getting out into screens or on zone, and also moving into a more power blocker, I think he does it all. For me, though, what the question is, and I think Jerry is saying it, and we're saying the same thing in different ways, was that I felt like he was trying to overcompensate for the fact that in the spring measurements, he measured in with 32.5-inch arms at 6'7".
Okay.
So a lot of those reps in pass protection where I feel like he takes a bit shallower of an angle where he wants to get into engaging with the guy quicker, and not having, maybe not because he's like, he doesn't have the fastest feel like you were saying, but I think he's adequate enough to do it. I think what he likes to do is get into and start battling with the guy with his hands initially, which may also lead to some of that lunging and reaching to get his hands on quicker, because he understands that he doesn't have the length to really fight with these guys out in the perimeter, especially for a guy who is 6'7". This is kind of the Will Campbell problem.
I was just going to say that we got a Will Campbell issue. Yeah.
So where he's trying to get hands on right away, because he knows that if he's working in space and this guy who's got arms on him, I know a guy that me and Newt were pretty high on, Hopper from Tulane, gave him a lot of fits because he's a guy who has those like 34, 35-inch arms, and you can see the discrepancy there when there was more space generated despite being a 5 tech. So I think with Tiernan, there's a lot of stuff where he does it all great. He's technically there, athletically there, power there. It's going to be, how can you overcome that 32.5-inch arms? And the way his play style, I think, really plays into that, because he understands that that's a problem. And that's what leads to some of the issues you see on tape where he's trying to overcompensate for that a little bit.
And I think some of it, because of some of the limitations, I think he comes off sometimes seamless and doing some things and looks real comfortable, because I think his knowledge of the game and his processing of the game and the situation is probably more dominant than his overall athleticism and abilities that way. So I think he understands the game really well. He's a good processor, but it's a great, I'm glad you brought that point up, Owen, and that does answer a lot of questions about the punching, because I did not know that he had the arm length issue that he would, and you wouldn't think somebody 6'7" would, but we did have that with Will Campbell last year. But no, I still think he's a good player, but he's got to figure that punch sequence stuff out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm
sorry if I stole your thunder, Jim.
No. We're all good. So I'm in the middle of reviewing the 2024 NFL draft and counting some tackles. I have a question for you guys after we do the next player.
Jim?
Well, you guys are grading. You guys are grading higher than I have seen consensus on both Barber and Tiernan, which actually makes it sound like it's a good offensive tackle class.
No, I think it's better than I thought it was, but I don't think it's – all right, how do I want to say this? I don't think it's loaded with elite offensive tackles. I think it's loaded with really good eventual NFL starting tackles. Does that make sense?
Yes. And
I think there's a lot of solid –
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of solid players who are going to make teams and play a long time, but I don't think there's many guys that we're trying to trade up into the top 10 to get.
Okay. So, Max, Iheanachor. Max Iheanachor from Arizona State. What do you have on Max, Owen?
I'm proud of you, Jim. I'm not going to repeat that name because you just took your shot, and I'll let it sit there. I'll call him Max from the rest of this point on, so I don't have to do that as well. But 6'6", 330, was a JUCO player for 2 years before transferring up to Arizona State. So with the extra year given to guys who were at JUCO levels and the eligibility stuff. He's a 5th-year senior playing still, despite having played 2 years JUCO, now 3 years at Arizona. A guy that I think should have been a Power 4 guy out the gates if he was this level of athlete with this level of size at the JUCO level. I'd love to see that JUCO tape, to see a guy that can move like this, who is this big. He's a guy that performs all the things I want to see from a tackle that's going to be in a move blocking system, where he's able to get out in space, reach, work in screens, work as a puller, because he's able to generate a lot of speed coming across the formation. I do think he does a lot of stuff and a lot of wins with his athleticism, especially. So I like him a lot when it comes to that, where it's kind of like we're talking about these other guys that, they're going to be these drafted because they are athletes. Now, for me with Max, I'm not the biggest fan of some of his hand technique, especially like going against some of these higher level competition, like the Texas Tech guys. He's not technically refined with his hands enough that he goes against pass rushers that are going to be, day 2, day 1 picks. And you can see the discrepancy there when he's going against guys that can know how to use their hands and know how to swipe and combat some of his later punches, and being able to combat some of those two-handed technique stuff where he's not able to really work independently, and they punish him for that. And as well as, I wasn't the biggest fan, which was surprising with the amount of movement he has plus size. He doesn't really generate that much power off the line of scrimmage. Even like going back to that Texas Tech game, the edge rusher, I can't remember which one it was that we talked about last week, Jim. The big thing for me with him was that I didn't think he was a good play side run defender. He was even getting buried by tight ends against Utah and stuff. But Max wasn't even really able to generate all that much push against himself in that game. And as for a guy that was getting pushed around by tight ends at the same level, I wasn't the biggest fan of that. The first time and only time I really saw a ton of power generated by him was in the game against Texas State, where he was able to go against some lower level athletes and kind of out athlete these guys and get to spots. And that's where you saw some nasty show up, saw him throw some bodies around. But once you got to the point where he was going against high level competition, I just didn't really love it at that point. But I do think he has a ton of athletic traits that you really love, has the size, has some technique that can grow to the point where he's at, because he has did come from a lower level, and now he's just coming up because he is such a good athlete. I think if you get your hands on him, you can adjust him there and really coach him up. And then as well, I think he can generate a lot more power if he's able to have some better hand technique, hand placement, be able to latch on and drive through, because he has that athleticism. So he's got some room to grow despite having some good traits.
I'll say this: find me a bunch of guys that play in a 2-point stance that have a lot of really good movement of down linemen. There's not many of them. That's why you get in a 3-point stance, because you get leverage. But anyway, that's just me. But a little bit more about his background, just to kind of build off of what Owen had to say. Yeah, he was a JUCO kid, but he only played 1 year of high school before he went to JUCO. So he's another kid like our guy at Penn State that's late to the game. He hasn't played a lot of football. So to see where he is now with, 4, maybe 5 years of football, pretty darn good. I mean, he's a big, long-arm tackle. He's got good foot movement and quickness. His pass profile, his pass pro is really good. I think he can move people. Some of his issues become the fact that he gets his pads too high and has some issues because his pad level drifts a little bit on him. But I think that he would have no problem moving people once he gets his techniques better there in the run game. Again, smooth athlete for his size, has no issues in space. He can mirror speed rushers, get speed rushers upfield and also sit down and anchor against power. I think the guy's a fast riser. I mean, to where he is now, and then knowing that he's only played 1 year of high school football. I mean, again, this is a huge upside guy for being really new to the game. And I think his thing is just more snaps, more refined technique, and he'll get better and better. I've got him right there with P.J. Williams. I actually probably like Max more than I like P.J. Williams, just because of that potential he has with the fact that he's hardly played the game of football, but they're very similar in my evaluation. I think he goes somewhere, you put him in a right tackle and just let him play and learn, and in 10 years you're talking about a great career. So I like the guy quite a bit. I think he projects anywhere from round 2 to round 3. If there's question marks or not a run on tackles, maybe drops in the round 4. But I comfortably have him round 3, And then does he move up one or does he move down one? That depends on a lot of times on circumstances that guys can't control.
Owen, what was your grade on Max?
So I have him as the highest round 4 grade I could have. So I have him in that same kind of bucket where PJ Williams, lower end, round 3 grade. Even Xavier Chaplin I have in that range just because he has some of those size things, and I think you can definitely pull a lot out of him in that same range right there. So like PJ Williams, Xavier Chaplin, and Max I have all in the same kind of bucket there between late round 3 and early round 4.
I mean, I think you put Max up against Chaplin's film. It's night and day as far as movement and all that goes. I don't even think it doesn't even remotely look close. And if you draft this guy to a team that's heavy tackle wise, he'll have no problem moving inside either. Especially in a scheme where you run a bunch of pullers and gap scheme stuff, his movement's so smooth. He would project very well in there too. So I think he's very multi-positional as well.
So Drew and Anthony covered Max and Austin Barber on their podcast on Saturday. Their grades on the two players are almost 180 from where both of you. So they have Max. They both had Max in round 1, and they had Austin Barber in round 4.
Okay.
Great.
Just to give an idea. Okay, so let's do a quick review of the offensive tackle class. So on average, 5 offensive tackles are drafted in round 1. So just to remind everybody, some of the tackles we have talked about on our podcast. We've talked about Drew Shelton from Penn State, Isaiah World from Oregon, Carter Smith from Indiana, likely a return to school, but we have talked about it. We've talked about Caden Proctor from Alabama. We have talked about PJ Williams from SMU. Spencer Fano is offensive tackle 6 that we've talked about from Utah. We have talked about Max from Arizona State. He would be 7. We've talked about Austin Barber from Florida at 8. He would be 8. Caleb Tiernan, 9. So those are 9 offensive tackles we've talked about. The over-under for round 1 is 5. Jerry, you taking the over or the under with your preliminary evaluation so far?
Under.
Okay. Owen, how about you?
I think I would take the over for the round 1. I have with adding in the positional multiplier for them being true tackles, and if we're counting. Are we counting Maui Goa in this, or so we can count him as an interior offensive lineman?
Oh, and I didn't even count Maui Noah, right? So Maui Noah would bump that up, right? And there's a gray area because, for example, Jordan Morgan was labeled as a tackle when he was drafted. So he flipped that average up when I believe he plays guard for Green Bay.
I mean, I don't know how Owen feels, but I think right now, comfortably, I would say probably – Fano, Maui Noah, and Tiernan are probably maybe I don't know. I hate to use the word lock, and I know how these things get.
It's okay.
Get all skewed,
based on your evaluation.
Based on evaluation, as far as tackles go, I think those 3 are probably definite round 1s, and then where does Shelton, where does World, where do some of these other guys fall in place?
Yeah, I think Fano, Maui Noah. The guy we're going to get to next week with Caleb Lomu, the other Utah tackle I have as a lock there. And I'm rather higher on World. I think he could be a guy that I don't see a lot of teams looking at that skill set and what he's done so far with Oregon and moving past him at past round 1. The questions are going to be whether or not the mix of Proctor, Tiernan, just because of the arm length, Sheldon are going to be the guys that I think could all also be called in round 1. So I think there are 4 minimum that are going to get called, and there's enough names that I'm willing to take the over there. But once we get past that, and Jim, I'll let you lead into the next question with the rounds 1 plus 2 there. That'll make it interesting.
Yeah. So historical average, round 1 plus 2 has 8 tackles taken. So Owen, you're going to take the over or the under on 8 round 1 plus 2?
I think I would take. That's a great number because I would say push because it's like if you put it at 8.5, I'm taking the under. even though I took the over on the round one, because outside of those guys I named, there's Shelton, Barber, Tiernan, Proctor, and then World Lomu, Maui Noah, Fano. Those are the guys. Those are the 8 I see with having, or that I personally have with round 1/round 2 grades. So we're at 8 players. Can more than 5 of them get in the first round? Yes. Can other guys slip into round 2 outside of that group? I'm not entirely in favor of that. And now that's not counting Dunker if he gets announced as a tackle. That's not counting Brian Parker if he gets announced as a tackle. But of the guys I have graded as tackle, I think round 1 plus round 2, 8 is right about the number I think that it will be at. So I would say, I guess, under if you're going to go 8.5, over if you're going 7.5.
Okay. Jerry, round 1 plus 2, offensive tackles at 8.
I could see that. I mean, but again, I think the big rub is you're taking a tackle, but really he's a guard, right? You're taking a tackle, but he's going to be a swing guy. So, I think it can happen. Yes. I hate to predict these things.
That's okay.
Because the reason why is because it's just so subjective as far as what is the run. If all of a sudden it gets crazy lineman heavy, we could have 12. And we've seen that in the past, but I could see 8 going in the first 2 rounds, but I don't think all 8 are going to be tackles when they get to their teams. I think of those 8, some of them will be bumped inside, like, for instance, Dunker from Iowa being one of those.
Okay. So next week, as Owen pointed out, we will have Caleb Lomu, who is the other tackle from Utah. Now, he has another year of eligibility, so there's no guarantee he's in this draft class. Next week, we're also going to do Bo Stevens from Iowa. We will do Blake Miller, the offensive tackle from Clemson. We will do Corey Robinson, the offensive tackle from Arkansas. Liam Becker, offensive tackle from North Dakota. Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle from Georgia. Logan Jones, the center from Iowa. And Keelan Rutledge, the guard from Georgia Tech. So those will be the players that we do next week. And then we will have one more podcast after Thanksgiving as well to break down 8 or 9 more. And then after that, we will talk about rankings of all of the offensive linemen that we have covered. But Owen, you want to take a minute and let everybody know about the Weekly Huddle and the other content that you make?
Yep. So over at the Weekly Huddle on Twitter and as well as YouTube, I cover a lot of stuff, mostly drafts things. You can see my takes over on Twitter. You can check out eventually when I start posting again on YouTube videos, breaking down film, talking about different prospects. You'll definitely see a lot of guys that I'm higher on. You're going to get my opinion on them. If you can't get enough of me talking about them here on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. or on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on the Draft Presser, you can always go over there and sub to the Weekly Huddle on YouTube and check out some more prospect opinions over there, as well as seeing some other friendly faces from the Draft Professor that pop in ever so often, like Newt, like Randall, like a couple of the other guys that have appeared on this here podcast have already shown up over there on the Weekly Huddle as well. So if you need more Draft Professor, more draft in your life, you can go check that out over there on YouTube as well.
We're on YouTube on Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. We're also on Locked On Channel. We do a show twice a week called Bill Squad with Joe Marino and also Jeremy White. And then also started doing a new show on Locked On that we will be out on Wednesdays called NFL Player Squad. And it's myself and about 6-7 other guys that played in the league that are squad hosts or on squad shows. And we do an NFL-related show once a week as well. So that'll be on Wednesdays, but that's where you can check me out.
And then I just want to give a plug for the Draft Professor Simulator. It is interactive, so whenever you do a mock draft, it's moving the players on the player board. So go ahead, check it out. You will see a lot of demonstrations of the simulator on this channel, but there really is no simulator like it. So if you as a fan do a mock draft, there's a really good chance that the next person that does a mock draft is going to see some of the players you pick go to that team. So that was the way I designed it. I hope you have fun with it. It is definitely my favorite toy. For Jerry Ostroski, for Owen, for myself, for the 110 people at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.